Okay, well, we will convene this meeting at 7:01 PM and we will ask for a roll call.
Good. Belvedere. Benicia. Benicia. I saw Director Strawbridge in the waiting room, so I think she's probably being let in.
Maybe we can circle back to her at the end.
Concord.
I'm here, Eddie.
Contra Costa County. Corte Madera. Danville.
Here.
El Cerrito.
Here.
Fairfax.
Here.
Fairfield. Lafayette.
Here.
Larkspur.
Here.
County of Marin.
Here.
Martinez. Mill Valley. Moraga.
Here.
County of Napa and all 5 Napa cities. Novato. Oakley.
Here.
Pinole. Pittsburgh.
Here.
Pleasant Hill. Richmond.
Here,
Ross.
Here.
San Anselmo. San Pablo.
Here.
San Rafael. San Ramon.
Here.
Sausalito. Solano.
Here.
Tiburon.
Here.
Vallejo. And Walnut Creek.
Here.
And circling back to Benicia.
I'm here.
Thank you. Quorum established.
all right, thank you.
And
The next item is board announcements. Does anybody have any announcements at this time? Okay.
Chair, but I was just going to say I am here. This is Max from Mill Valley. I walked in just as Jessica was saying Mill Valley. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other board announcements? Okay, that brings us to public open time. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on any items that are either on the consent calendar or not on the agenda?
I see no raised hands, Chair.
Okay, next item is one we're all familiar with, resolution number 2022-12, authorizing continued remote teleconference meetings for the Board of Directors and every committee of the Board of Directors pursuant to Government Code 54953E. Everybody knows what this is about. Do we have a motion?
I'll move the motion. I'll move the resolution.
Second.
Okay, any public comment? Okay, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Belvedere. Benicia.
Yes.
Concord.
Yes.
Contra Costa County. Corte Madera. Danville.
Yes.
El Cerrito.
Aye.
Fairfax.
Yes.
Fairfield. Lafayette.
Yes.
Larkspur.
Yes.
County of Marin.
Yes.
Martinez. Mill Valley.
Yes.
Moraga.
Yes.
Napa. Novato. Oakley.
Yes.
Pinole. Pittsburgh,
Yes.
Pleasant Hill, Richmond,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
San Anselmo, San Pablo,
Yes.
San Rafael, San Ramon,
Yes.
Sausalito, Solano,
Here.
Solano,
Yes.
Tiburon,
You did hear me.
Yes. Yes.
Vallejo, Walnut Creek,
Yes.
Yes, we heard you,
Motion carried.
Supervisor Vasquez.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you. The next item is the consent calendar. We have three items on it. Does anybody wish to take anything off for discussion? I don't hear any requests, so I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move that we approve the consent calendar, Mrs. Eddy.
Okay,
I'll
motion
second.
Bersan, second by Perkins. Call the roll, please.
Belvedere, Benicia,
Yes.
Concord,
Yes.
Contra Costa County, Corte Madera, Danville,
Yes.
El Cerrito,
Aye.
Fairfax,
Yes, but I'll have to abstain on the first of the 2 minutes because I wasn't at the meeting.
thank you. Fairfield, Lafayette,
Yes.
Larkspur,
Yes.
County of Marin,
Yes.
Martinez, Mill Valley,
Yes.
Moraga,
Yes.
Napa, Novato, Oakley,
Yes.
Pinole, Pittsburgh,
Yes.
Pleasant Hill, Richmond,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
San Anselmo, San Pablo,
Yes.
San Rafael, San Ramon,
Yes.
Sausalito, Solano,
Yes.
Tiburon,
Yes.
Vallejo, Walnut Creek,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, the next item is item 7, addition of board members to committees. Is there a staff report?
Yeah, actually, before we jump into that item, Chair, but I have a brief director's report or CEO report. Item 5.
Oh, I'm
you're
sorry.
comfortable. That's
Did we
okay.
skipped item 5?
We did.
I don't know. I guess, okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. We can
Okay.
take care of it pretty quickly. So I'll jump into that real quick. I just wanted to start with a big thank you and acknowledgement for all of the support coming from our board members and members of the public during the first week of September, when we experienced the longest and hottest heat wave in California history that resulted in 10 consecutive days of flex alerts issued from the California Independent System Operator that asked all Californians to conserve energy. There was a huge effort, and in MCE territory, we had nearly 3,500 customers reducing load through our Peak Flex program and our Smart EV charging program, MCE Sync. We sent emails to over 300,000 customers asking them to conserve, and we had an amazing 50% open rate and a lot of responses. And another 24 personalized emails were sent to our largest commercial customers, local government staff, business, and housing associations. We also started airing our own TV commercial encouraging energy conservation from 4 to 9 the day before this Flex Alert started. And if you haven't seen it yet, let us know. We can send you a link. And despite the record-breaking heat, the grid was able to stay functioning just fine. And we just want to thank all of our board members and the public for helping to get the word out. We've already started planning for how we can handle the heat events that we're likely to see next summer. I also wanted to let folks know that on September 16th in Solano County, Governor Newsom signed a package of world-leading climate action legislation to enact some of the nation's most aggressive climate measures in history. And also, he at that press conference, he announced a record $54 billion that'll be spent in climate investment in this year's budget. So we're really excited that that took place in our service area, and thank the board members that were able to join us for that event. And then the last thing I wanted to update folks on is more of a recent development. You may have heard that the governor's declared COVID-19 state of emergency is set to end on February 28th of next year, which means the remote meeting requirements established by AB 361 that we just voted on will expire at the end of February. So remote attendance after AB 361 expires will only be allowed based on the traditional noticing requirements of the Brown Act, which we all probably remember, or we have the option of complying with a new bill that was signed into law, AB 2449, which goes into effect on January 1. Under AB 2449, remote participation is only allowed if a quorum of board members participates in person at a single location, and the remote participation has to be due to just cause or an emergency situation, which is defined. Also, AB 2449 restricts how many meetings a board member may participate in remotely. So complying with AB 2449 will impact MCE's ability to host meetings at both its Concord and San Rafael office locations, as we've done in the past, kind of splitting folks up and allowing them to go to the most convenient location. Because of this, it's likely that we may simply, your board may simply choose to revert to the traditional Brown Act requirements. But we do plan to bring this topic for discussion to a committee meeting and possibly also a board meeting in January or early February for input on preferences for remote attendance under the original Brown Act requirements or the new requirements of AB 2449. So more to come on that once we hit the new year. And that's it for my report. Although I did want to give folks a heads up that we are planning to hold our regular board meetings in November and December, just to make sure those dates stay on your calendar. We don't think those meetings will be super long, but we do need to have them, so they will be happening. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Dawn? Okay, looks like you covered it. Okay, now back to item 7, additional board members to committees.
Yeah, so this is an opportunity for folks to volunteer for any of our standing committees or ad hoc committees. The committee we are particularly drumming up interest for right now is the Richmond Virtual Power Plant. And in your packet, there's a one-pager that shows the current membership in committees, just to give you a sense of who's doing what and where you might be able to plug in if you're not already plugged in. And we've already got 4 interested board members for the ad hoc committee for the Richmond Virtual Power Plant. That's listed at the bottom, VPPT. So if anyone is interested in that committee or any of the other committees showing up here, now's the time to say so. I should note that our 2022 committees will be expiring at the end of the year and will be reformed in 2023. So at this time, volunteering for a committee will probably get you onto the 2023 roster for those ad hocs.
Director Perkins, go ahead.
I'd like to volunteer to be on the ad hoc contracts committee, if you have space.
Great. Okay.
Okay, any other volunteers? Don't be shy.
I have a question. How many people can be on each committee?
There's not a limit as long as we don't hit a quorum of the board or a quorum of any committee. So for example, if you end up with a quorum of XCOM on the ad hoc audit committee, that wouldn't be okay. So those are the only things we have to avoid, but there's no size limit aside from that.
I'd be interested in the XCOM.
Great. Okay.
Director Harold, go ahead.
Just real quick, I would be, since we're hitting a deadline where things will expire, obviously some of us have elections coming up. I'm one of those people. So it is conceivable that I will not be reelected to my position on Larkspur City Council. I don't anticipate that, but I'm hesitant to make commitments until the election is over.
Problem. We will have opportunities to do this again at the beginning of the year.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Well, that gives us a couple of people, so
Yeah.
we can work with that, and hopefully after the November election, we'll have a flood of people who are reelected and want to serve on a committee.
And
Excellent.
Tom,
Okay.
if I could just interject, if by some good chance of luck I am reelected, I am happy to serve on the committees that I currently serve on.
Okay, that brings us to item 8, approval of CPUC integrated resource plan.
Great. So we have a presentation on this item, and I'll turn it over to our Power Resources team.
Thanks, Don. So I'll actually start the presentation. And so one sec, let me get my screen all set up here. Sorry. Okay, great. Good evening, directors. My name is Sabrina Soldavini. I'm a member of MCE's policy team. And tonight, staff is recommending that your board approve MCE's 2022 Compliance Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP, for submission to the California Public Utilities Commission, or CPUC. And I'll begin by giving a brief overview of the background, regulatory requirements, and MCE's compliance IRP objectives, and then pass the presentation over to Johnny, MCE's Power Procurement Manager, who will walk us through MCE's compliance IRP portfolio before opening up the items for discussion, where we'll also have some additional team members and one of the consultants who helped us develop the plan available to answer any questions. Next slide, please. Yeah, so for a little bit of background and regulatory context, as a load-serving entity, or LSE, MCE is required to file an integrated resource plan, or IRP, with the CPUC every 2 years. And at a really high level, the CPUC's IRP process is a planning exercise to detail the procurement plan each LSE has adopted for meeting the state's goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions to ensure California has a safe, reliable, and cost-effective electricity supply. But of course, this board has the authority to approve MCE's procurement and rates, including approval of MCE's compliance IRP, which is why before submitting this plan to the commission on November 1st, we're bringing this item before you tonight for your approval. And as you may be aware, in addition to MCE's required compliance IRP, MCE prepares an annual operational IRP to be approved by your board and guide its long-term procurement strategy. So to ensure consistency between MCE's compliance IRP and operational IRP, the two have been developed concurrently and reflect consistent goals and long-term planning targets. And the operational IRP is scheduled to come before the board for approval at November's technical committee meeting. And just before we continue, I just want to note here that this compliance IRP is really a planning exercise, and there are no direct fiscal impacts of adopting the 2022 compliance IRP today, and any future resource commitments that may be made in effectuating the plan would be subject to separate approval following MCE's guidelines. Next slide, please. So when developing the compliance IRP, MCE is required to submit an IRP that meets all of the CPUC's requirements. For example, the CPUC issues templates and models that must be utilized in IRP development, which we've completed to describe MCE's planned energy and capacity resources through 2035. And essentially, the CPUC has developed and modeled two statewide portfolios targeting two different electric sector GHG emission targets. And those statewide portfolios are referred to as preferred system plans, or PSPs. MCE then is required to develop an integrated resource plan that allows us to remain at or below MCE's CPUC assigned share of statewide GHG emissions for those two statewide portfolios, or PSPs. And specifically, MCE must submit an IRP that meets our share of GHG emissions for two PSPs, one which achieves a 2035 emissions limit of 30 million metric tons, or MMTs, and a second which achieves a 2035 emissions limit of 25 MMT. And in addition to environmental targets like GHG emissions and local air pollutant minimization, MCE must submit an IRP that meets CPUC determined reliability standards. Next slide, please.
Quick question on that before you move on. In scenario 1 and 2, if we increase our customer base by 20 or 30%, are we still held to those same 20 or 25 and 30 million metric ton limits?
Yes, that's correct. Those are statewide emission targets. Although I guess I should say too, this process occurs every 2 years. So there will be kind of a full system update biannually. So those targets get updated every 2 years as well.
Yeah. Well, the Bay Area, they're requiring us to plan for over 440,000 housing units over the next 8 years. It just seems kind of incongruous that the limits don't change.
Yeah, I hear you. I would say, so the CPUC does update the limits. Those targets are going to change over time. Though I will say, and if others want to chime in, feel free. I do think we're unlikely to see the statewide emissions limits, increase over time. I would expect to see them decrease over time.
Just to add in, the planning involves some projections of load growth and electrification, and so some of that future look is baked in, and it'll, again, to Sabrina's point, get trued up over time.
Any other questions? No. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, and so as we developed MCE's plan to meet compliance requirements set by the CPUC, there are also a number of objectives MCE aims to achieve, and those include developing a single IRP portfolio to meet the criteria for both emissions scenarios, so that 25 MMT and 30 MMT targets referenced on the last slide. Developing a plan that is generally consistent with the CPUC's statewide portfolios, including their procurement timing and resource mix. And additionally, we aim to achieve a portfolio that is economic and reliable and includes achieving all of MCE's resource adequacy requirements. And lastly, we strive to include a diversified portfolio of resources in the IRP to create a portfolio that consists of short-term and long-term electricity, resource adequacy, and load reduction products. And with that, bit of background, I'll pass it over to Johnny to discuss the portfolio that MCE has developed for this compliance IRP cycle.
Thank you, Sabrina. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Johnny, and as Sabrina has said, I'll be taking you through the rest of the slides. In staff's coming up with the preferred conforming portfolio that is to be approved by your board and submitted to the CPUC, there were several factors that needed to be met. One was the energy requirements set by the projections that we provide and is set by the CPUC, the reliability requirements, and the emissions limitations in both the 30 MMT and the 25 MMT or million metric ton scenario. In coming up with this preferred conforming portfolio, staff made sure that the various MCE standards, guidelines, operating procedures, and environmental targets specifically were met. And just to name but a few, that we hit 85% renewable energy content by 2029, 12% hydroelectric energy by 2029, as is in the operational IRP previously approved. And also in addition that this preferred conforming portfolio be consistent with MCE's operational IRP, while at the same time satisfying the CPUC assigned emission limits, the energy and reliability requirements. Next slide, please. First off, while looking at the 30 MMT or million metric tons scenario, starting with the energy, in 2030 and 2035, MCE's assigned load targets were 5,955 and 6,099 gigawatt hours respectively. And secondly, in terms of the emissions targets, the GHG benchmark assigned for MCE were 0.848 and 0.630 million metric tons of GHG emissions by 2030 and 2035 respectively. MCE's preferred conforming portfolio, or PCP, in 2030 achieves a 0.5 million metric tons, and in 2035 a 0.514 million metric tons target. And as you can see, both of those years are coming well below what the assigned MCE's emission targets are. Next slide. As for the 25 million metric ton scenario, the energy requirements stay the same. However, for the emissions target in 2030 and 2035 respectively, they come down to 0.64 and 0.504 million metric tons respectively. And as for MCE's PCP emissions, they come at 0.49 and 0.492 million metric tons respectively for both subsequent years, both of which are below the targets. I would also like to mention here that as earlier mentioned by Sabrina, this was one preferred conforming portfolio being measured and looked at from the two separate scenarios. And as you can see, the preferred conforming portfolio that is being brought up here meets both of those targets. Next slide, please. To come up with this preferred conforming portfolio, it was twofold. One, there is the existing already signed contracts that are in place, some of which will be in place through 2035 and some of which will fall off. And to also bolster that, staff in this preferred conforming portfolio, I put a plan for an extra 1,091 of new capacity by 2035. This capacity was largely made up of 212 megawatts of new solar, coupled with 153 megawatts of storage, another 265 megawatts of wind, which is made up of a combination of both in-state, out-of-state, and offshore wind, 400 megawatts of standalone battery storage, assumed to be the 4-hour battery storage, 109 megawatts of geothermal, 90 megawatts of long duration storage, assumed to be 8 hours or longer in storage, and 15 megawatts of demand response. Put all together, next slide, please. The current MCE's PCP meets the MCE's reliability targets that are set forth for both from 2024 to 2035 as seen here. And just to also recap, the energy targets that were set are met. The emissions targets that are set forth for both the 25 million metric tons and 30 million metric tons were all met. And as you can see here, the reliability requirements and targets that are set forth are also met all through the years. With that, I would like to, next slide, please. It is therefore staff's recommendation that your board approves MCE's 2022 CPUC compliance IRP. And with that, I would like to open up this forum for questions.
Are there any questions from board members? I see Director Haroff. Go ahead. Unmute, please.
There, I did it. I'll never learn. I've seen aspects of this presentation in the past, and I just want to commend MCE staff for putting this together. The ability to establish reliability to the extent that it satisfies the regulatory agencies, some of which have jurisdiction over us, and some of which do not, I think is a great accomplishment, and is a testament to the sustainability of our community choice model in the North Bay. So thank you for that.
Okay, any other questions from board members? I don't see any. If you have a question, just go ahead and shout out. Otherwise, I will go to public speakers. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this item?
I see no raised hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further comments from board members, or are we ready for a motion?
Kevin, are you gonna move?
I mean, yes, I'm happy to move. I was waiting for others to maybe speak up, but I'd have to move to approve this program.
Okay,
I'll second.
I'll second.
okay, motion by Haroff. Who was the second?
Drawbridge.
Okay, thank you. Call the roll, please.
Belvedere. Benicia.
Yes.
Concord. Concord. Contra Costa County. Corte Madera.
Yes.
Danville.
Yes.
El Cerrito.
Aye.
Fairfax.
Yes.
Fairfield. Lafayette.
Yes.
Larkspur.
Enthusiastically, yes.
Great. Marin.
Yes.
Martinez. Mill Valley.
Yes.
Moraga.
Yes.
Napa. Novato. Oakley.
Yes.
Pinole. Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Pleasant Hill.
Yes.
Richmond.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
San Anselmo. San Pablo.
Yes.
San Rafael. San Ramon.
Yes.
Sausalito. Solano.
Yes.
Tiburon.
Yes.
Vallejo. Walnut Creek.
Concord, yes, I had some manual problems.
Thank you. Walnut Creek. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. The next one, item 9, and is there a spelling error in here? M-A-Y-A-C-M-A. I thought it was Maya, comma. Can somebody?
Yes. There is not a spelling error, Director Butt. That is the given name of the project by the project engineers. So it is Mayakma.
Mayakma. Okay, thank you. I didn't think you guys would have made a mistake, but you never know. Okay, so item 9 is approval of power purchase agreement with Mayakma Geothermal LLC.
Thank you for that. Good evening, MCE Board of Directors. My name is David Potofsky. I'm a member of the power procurement team here at MCE. And I'm here to present the Mayakma Geothermal LLC power purchase agreement this evening. Happy to take questions along the way or save them for the end. Next slide, please. Actually, before I get started, the commercially sensitive terms in the power purchase agreement have been redacted, as you may have seen. The unredacted document was presented to Directors Quinto and Darling. After the presentation, if you do have any questions about any of the unredacted, or I'm sorry, about any of the redacted portions of the PPA, they will be here to provide any input on that for any or all of the redacted terms. So this project came to us through our open season process. For those of the new members of the board of directors, MCE does an annual solicitation for large scale renewable energy and storage projects. We tell the development community that we are looking for projects, and we tell them the type of projects, and that way we get a lot of market intel. We get the largest number of projects at any given moment, and we're able to compare them and choose the best ones. Next slide, please. So we set our goals before we get started. We really had 3 pretty fundamental goals for the open season. Excuse me. Number 1, we need to meet the targets that we set out in our integrated resource planning. And those are for renewable energy and energy storage. Secondly, the very important resource adequacy. So MCE's obligation for reliability of the grid. And we need to add to that RA supply in our portfolio. And finally, one of the guiding principles was the mandate that came down from the California Public Utilities Commission for the midterm reliability, or MTR. These are obligations that were handed down, and our team has been very diligently working to get us through. So you'll see a common slide that we've used in the past, and with any luck, we will only use it a few more times in the future, and we will have complied with our obligation for this particular decision. So the product types that we went to open season for were renewable energy in the form of PCC1, or renewable product content category 1, and that's primarily energy. We also looked at paired and standalone energy storage. Next slide, please. So I will not get too deep into the weeds, because this is already deep into the weeds, but it just goes to show you the 350 megawatts that came through this mandate, that we're obligated to provide projects that are coming online between 23 and 26, and the various buckets or types that we're going to have to comply with. And so far we're doing pretty well in meeting these compliances, but it was really a very large ask that came down from the CPUC. Next slide, please. So we have brought 2 projects to the board so far. In July, we brought the Humidor project. It's a 185 megawatt standalone battery energy storage project. And that took care of our largest bucket. And between that and a project that we had assigned previously, that took care of that bucket there in red. In February, we brought the Golden Fields to the board, Golden Fields Solar Plus Storage Project. Executed that contract in February, and that handled the DCPP, or Diablo Canyon replacement bucket. The MyACMA project, when combined with a couple of others that we hope to be bringing to you in both November and December, will fulfill that clean, firm bucket, which will leave long duration storage as something that we continue to work on and will likely be filled during open season 2023. But this just shows that we've made fantastic progress in meeting this obligation, and believe that we're a little bit ahead of the curve, though I will continue to knock on wood that we make the progress we have been. Next slide, please.
Quick question on Diablo Canyon. Because the legislature passed an extension for the life of Diablo Canyon, is that going to change our requirements going forward? Or we've signed a contract with Golden Fields, so how does that play?
So I will punt that question to Michael Callahan, number one. But before I do, I will tell you that this is still a very valuable project to us, regardless of our obligation. And it's a solid below market price as well. So we regardless of the MTR mandate, we need RA and we need energy. And we're able to, with the very large battery on that project, we're able to shape and deliver the energy in key hours that we need it. So it is a very good project regardless, but I will let Michael Callahan respond to your first question.
It's a really good question. It's a question that I've asked the commission. Unfortunately, the legislation that came out supporting the extension of Diablo Canyon included an express provision that Diablo Canyon's life beyond the current retirement date cannot be factored into the IRP, integrated resources planning process. And so the commission is unfortunately prohibited from factoring it into their models, which to me is a frustrating situation, which I think makes some sense in the context of there's some safety issues at Diablo, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is going to have to weigh in about whether the extension is going to happen. So I think there's some uncertainty there. But ultimately, I think, we'd like to see some relief on the mandates to reduce the upward pressure we've been seeing in prices. So disappointing to see that exception. And just to flag it, Diablo Canyon, as well as some other resources, are sort of being used by the state as a strategic reliability reserve. And that's one way that they're approaching it.
Any further
Thank you.
questions?
Director Haroff, you got a question?
Just a quick follow-up on that. I understand the motivation of the state in what they're doing with Diablo Canyon, but the question is a good one. And I share your frustration about the lack of, frankly, a responsible answer to that question from our perspective. We really kind of need to know that, I think. And I'm not sure what the administrative process is that would provide us the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, we're going to keep pushing it at the PUC. It is in statute, so it may actually require a legislative fix. My hope is we can get something in on some of the cleanup bills that we expect to see in the next session, at least to include it in the modeling if in fact it is extended, and looking for other ways to get relief indeed.
But there's no remedy with the CPUC.
Not at this point. Their hands are tied by the statute.
Okay.
Any other questions before we proceed? Next slide, please. So this is not MyACMA geothermal. They have not commenced construction yet, but this is just a good representation of what a geothermal generation plant looks like. The giant pipes are bringing steam from the ground, and that steam then creates or hits water. Sorry for that. And the water and the steam create heat, create more steam. So heat, water, steam runs a turbine generates electricity. So MyACMA is a small but mighty 7 megawatt geothermal energy installation. We typically would not be looking at such a small installation, but it's incremental to the baseline list of projects. So in essence, it's in addition to existing projects. So it counts for MTR. So it's very valuable to us, and we're going to piece together a number of smaller projects to meet our obligation. It's just north of here in Lake County. And as we compare projects that come in through our open season, we look at both price, which is important, but not the most important thing. It's really project viability. So looking at the qualitative pieces and digging deep into these projects, because the cheapest project in the world is worthless to us if it doesn't come online. Next slide, please. So not only is this project running round the clock providing energy, it also provides MCE 7 megawatts of very valuable RA capacity, resource adequacy capacity. The 7 megawatts is hard to compare to anything else because it's delivering around the clock. It's a baseload resource. So if you were to look at this against 7 megawatts of solar, for example, it's generating 6 to maybe 8 hours a day. This is running around the clock. So you can do the math. It's significantly more megawatt hours produced, more energy produced. It'll be coming online in June of 2024. The contract is a 20-year term, and MCE has no credit or collateral requirements. Next slide, please. So I spoke at the beginning about kind of setting our goals of what we were looking for. Well, we also look at our portfolio and say, what does MCE need? What types of resources are going to be important to our portfolio moving forward in a 10 to 20 year time frame? So we put these simulations together of what our portfolio will look like at a moment in time. And this particular visual is a snapshot from 2030. The red line is MCE's proposed estimated load in 2030, and both the shape of when our customers are using the energy and how much. The solid green line is our MCE's generation portfolio once all of the projects that we've signed to date come online. The flat line, dotted line at the bottom is really a simulated, for this exercise, simulated geothermal shape. So as you can see, it's virtually flat. The dotted line, and it's larger than this project, but really for this simulation, the dotted line here curved, you can see the impact of a geothermal project has on our existing portfolio. And it's filling in to the left and to the right where we need it. We have a fairly solar heavy portfolio. And yes, it does fill in where we may not want it, but it really fills in these edges here. Very expensive on the right side, slightly less expensive on the left side. But the goal eventually is to try and put together a generation portfolio that matches the red line. And so we need to get there somehow, and base load projects are part of our long-term solution, as are wind projects, battery storage. Battery storage, by the way, will help us with these where we produce above that red line. We're going to capture that energy and push it to where we want it, to the right and to the left of this green curve. So really, the three fundamentals here are that we are filling open positions that we very clearly have with geothermal. We're making an incremental contribution to matching our load with our renewable generation. And it's a hedge. We're fixing a price against volatile evening hours primarily, and other volatile hours. So in the morning sometimes as well, that we're fixing that price. So we're hedging our open positions. Next slide, please. So the contract, we try and make improvements to every contract that we do. This one in particular, we have financial incentives to make sure that the seller is performing. And we're looking at that very closely. We have union labor requirements on this contract. We've got a security deposit to make sure that the construction milestones are met, as well as the performance milestones are met. So we have a deposit in the form of a letter of credit. As we continue to move forward with our our contribution to the local communities, whether that's in our service area or in the communities adjacent to these projects, this contribution, it is kind of commensurate with the system size, but we'll take it, $21,000 to be used at MCE's discretion for a project that will improve communities in need. And we've got a list of possible things, but job training, green job training would be at the top of that list. We do have a delivery guarantee on this important resource adequacy. And as I talked earlier about the hedge, we have a fixed price. So we've got budget certainty, we've got energy and RA certainty over the contract term with no escalation on an annual basis. Next slide, please. So our recommendation is to approve this power purchase agreement between MCE and Mayakma Geothermal LLC. The rationale, just to kind of go back and reiterate some of these items I've talked about so far. The energy generation and RA produced from the facility will complement our existing portfolio of resources. This project type and the size, specifications, commercial operation date, very important, will help us meet our MTR mandated procurement. It's being developed by a very experienced team. It'll be operated by that same team. And we have done our diligence, and the project is highly viable. All of their major pre-construction milestones have been met. We're very clear on what they need to do with the CAISO to finalize their interconnection process. So they're at a state right now, which is very typical of a project that's coming online in 2024. And next slide, please. I believe that is all, and I'm ready for any questions that you might have.
Okay, are there any further questions from board members? Director Onata, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Do you see geothermal as being bigger and having a larger presence in your portfolio? Because unlike wind and solar, it's constant.
Yes, and that is part of our forward planning. Our integrated resource plan does include a significant increase in geothermal as part of our portfolio.
May I ask another one? What are the drawbacks with geothermal?
Well, there are few, in my personal opinion. It is not a weather dependent resource like wind and solar. I think the one small drawback is there is a very small amount of trace carbon. So it would be virtually impossible for you to have a 100% carbon-free portfolio. There are some other possible ways around that, but in truth, there is a very, very small amount. Still considered renewable, still considered PCC1, but that is up to the board and our carbon goals as to how close to 100 you would like to get, because there will be some limitations with geothermal.
Thank you.
Director Rice, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. really appreciate the presentation, and I can see, I mean, I'm thinking that this project is like gold. The geothermal is just absolute gold as we try to figure out the portfolio mix. I had a couple questions. First, about the community benefit package. As you said, 21,000 is not very much money. And I'm just wondering, I don't recall what our what we include in our RFP with regards to expectations on a community benefit package. So could you just remind me of what that is?
It's actually not a requirement. We were concerned that if we made it a requirement, it would just get built into the price and we would end up paying for it in the long run. And if that's what the board chooses, that would be fine with me. So what we do is we use it as a suggested, a tiebreaker, something that would give them extra credit. And frankly, it has been part of our part of the winning projects have all had a component. And because we are not prescriptive in exactly what it's going to be, we encourage them to do a job training program, build solar on a school, do something on your own, and then we'll give you credit for that. And they've all so far decided to give cash that would be used by our implemented by our team. Now, the larger projects did give $100,000 in cash. Some of them gave staff time. This is a relatively small project at a very good price. And I was frankly happy to take the 21,000.
Yeah, okay. I appreciate that. And I would actually love to have a discussion at a later date around this element of our program. I think it's really it's an environmental justice issue, especially when I'm thinking about Lake County, a lot of unemployment there. I know I've read the package. It's only, I think it said 24 people are basically required. It's not a lot of employment that this is going to generate, but it's being cited, and it is a for-profit project in an area of a lot of unemployment and anyway, economic distress, frankly. So I think, and then given, yes, we don't want, I understand about having something built into the price as it comes to MCE, but frankly, our ratepayers are the beneficiaries of projects like this that are located often nowhere near them and do have an impact of some sort or not present an opportunity. So I think that's something worth thinking about and talking about. And I'm actually marrying that comment up with your statement that you said that, I think you said we got it at a below market price. And I'm curious about that. And I'm thinking it may have something to do with Open Mountain Energy, which, the credentials are great. It's another thing that makes this particular contract gold, given the experience of this provider. Anyway, just if you could talk more about the below market price aspect of this. And yeah, and maybe we shouldn't be talking about this in public, can they back out of this if we don't sign?
They do have the ability to back out of this. They have negotiated. We've had a long and arduous negotiation of which there's been some give and take. So they certainly do, until the ink is dry, have the ability. We do have a deposit from them for exclusive negotiations. I don't think that's going to happen. They've been a terrific counterpart, and we actually have one more contract we're negotiating with them. It's not a dramatic amount below market. I have just it's the law of supply and demand, and this geothermal is there's a finite amount of steam. There's a finite amount of areas that these projects can be developed. It takes a long time. There's a lot of environmental due diligence before these projects can even break ground. We have the benefit of this project having an interconnection already. It was also in an area where there was a project previously that was demolished, and they're building a new one on the same pad in the same footprint. So there are a lot of reasons why this is slightly below market. And that, if you have a site and you have the environmental and you have the interconnection, that's a huge step forward to a viable project and a big budget savings. I think that when we nailed this project down, we were early in the MTR process. And as other load serving entities started moving towards compliance in this bucket or tranche, the prices started getting tight. There were even some vendors that were doing reverse auctions to get their price up. And there were some vendors that changed their price due to multiple circumstances. So I think that we were good and lucky by starting early, and found a good counterpart with a project that had lower capex.
I appreciate that. And I would just offer for the public record, and if anybody from Open Mountain Energy is listening, I am guessing that they actually participated and are engaged in this negotiation and contract because they see MCE also as an excellent, solid partner. So I get those are my questions, but all the way around, I just, excellent project. And I welcome having Open Mountain Energy be a partner with MCE. I think great things. But again, Dawn, make note of I would love to have a larger discussion about the community benefit packages and how we look at that going forward. I think it's really, really important.
Great idea. Yeah, we'll tee that up.
And Supervisor Rice, thank you for touching on MCE as an early, the first CCA, the most established, the credit rating. And we do have this particular CEO does realize that and has made a conscious choice to negotiate with us. And I believe he knows that he could get a few more dollars in the marketplace, and that's not always worth it. And
yeah.
So thank you for pointing that out. I think that's important. And thank you for pointing out the community benefits. This was something the team worked on it's evolving over time. And I would welcome asking for more and delivering more to deserving. It's going to deserving folks anyway. And as of the current count, we'll have $221,000 to spend on one or as many projects as we want. And I've been working with Alexandra on our team, who really kind of has her finger on the pulse of where the needs are.
Right. Great. Thank you. When it comes time, Chair Bud, I'd like to be able to make the motion to approve this contract.
Director Perry, go ahead.
Thank you, and great presentation, really exciting project. And as Director Rice said, definitely in an area that has a high level of poverty. So great to see that it aligns with our equity and environmental justice goals as well. Just a question following up on the previous questions on the community benefits side. As a new director, I was curious if the 21% or the 21,000, is that a percentage of the overall contract, and is that kind of a suggested percentage, or is it somewhat random? Do we kind of like have folks outbidding each other in terms of community benefit dollars?
It's a great question. In our RFO materials, we suggest a large number of areas that they could do on their own. And it really could be from job training programs to building an installation to habitat recovery and so on. And really, we give maybe a dozen suggestions. This came at a late stage in a long and pretty arduous negotiation, and they came back, and it was not the very top of the list as we were trying to get through some pretty important terms and conditions. And so at the end, I came back and I said, "You haven't populated Exhibit Q yet. What are we going to do?" And he went back to his board, and he came back with 21,000. Now, again, as a proportion of a small project, 7 megawatts, and a relatively small company. I felt that this was not enormous, but nor was it a topic that I wanted to, endanger the project with. So.
Great, thank you. Thanks for all your work.
Any other questions from board members? Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on this item?
I see no raised hands, Chair.
Okay, I believe Director Rice wanted to make a motion.
Yes, I would like to move that we authorize execution of the power purchase agreement with Mayakma Geothermal LLC for supply of bundled renewable energy NRA.
And Tom, this is Kevin Harrop. I'd be happy to second that motion.
I see about 3 seconds. Bursan, maybe. I'll take Bursan. Okay. Would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Belvedere. Benicia.
Yes.
Concord.
Yes.
Contra Costa County. Corte Madera.
Yes.
Danville.
Yes.
El Cerrito.
Yes.
Fairfax.
Yes.
Fairfield. Lafayette.
Yes.
Larkspur.
Yes.
County of Marin.
Yes.
Martinez. Mill Valley.
Yes.
Moraga.
Yes.
Napa. Novato. Oakley.
Yes.
Pinole. Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Pleasant Hill.
Yes.
Richmond.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
San Anselmo. San Pablo.
Yes.
San Rafael. San Ramon.
Yes.
Sausalito. Solano.
Yes.
Tiburon.
Yes.
Vallejo. And Walnut Creek.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Chair, but I wanted to ask if we could circle back to item 7. We didn't do a vote to make those committee additions, and probably a good idea just to err on the side of caution and do a vote on that. We had a nomination for, let's see, Director Max Perry to join XCOM, and then Director Perkins to join the Contracts Committee for 2023.
I'll move the appointments as amended.
I'll second.
Great. So I think we just need to do a roll call vote on that.
Don, what about Director Wilkinson's note to be on those committees?
Yeah, you know that I'm so glad you're asking about that, but I think that she is already on well, the audit committee for 2023. Let's if we could put forward a request to the board to add to that motion Sally Wilkinson to be on the 2023 audit committee. She sent an email and was unable to attend the meeting tonight.
I'll move that we add Wilkinson to the audit committee as
I'll second
an
that.
addition.
Thank you. Belvedere. Benicia.
Yes.
Concord.
Concord, yes.
Contra Costa County. Corte Madera.
Yes.
Danville.
Yes.
El Cerrito.
Yes.
Fairfax.
Yes.
Fairfield. Lafayette.
Yes.
Larkspur,
Yes.
County Marin,
Yes.
Martinez, Mill Valley,
Yes.
Moraga,
Yes.
Napa, Novato, Oakley,
Yes.
Pinal, Pittsburgh,
Yes.
Pleasant Hill,
Yes.
Richmond, Richmond,
Yes, I was muted.
thank you. Ross,
Yes.
San Anselmo, San Pablo,
Yes.
San Rafael, San Ramon,
Yes.
Sausalito, Solano,
Yes.
Tiburon,
Yes.
Vallejo, Walnut Creek. Motion carries.
Okay, the next item will be item 10, implementation of electrification rate schedule E-ELEC.
Great. And we're
Thank you
going
very much.
to. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good evening, directors, and thank you for your participation here this evening. My name is Justin Kudo. I am the Senior Rates Manager for MCE, and I'm pleased to have the chance to present and seek your approval of generation rates for the new rate schedule ELEC. Electrification has been a major goal of sustainability advocates for decades, and aiming to replace direct consumption of fossil fuels with lower emission electricity is certainly a goal aligned with MCE. Historically, this has had limited support from state regulators, but during PG&E's 2018 rate design window proceeding, the CPUC directed energy providers to create a residential pro-electrification rate schedule. Electrification has really been a challenge under residential rates due to the tiering structure where customers receive surcharges for high volume usage. Under these structures, converting from, say, gas heating to electric heating could result in a house being pushed into a higher tier and therefore subject to higher PG&E delivery rates. PG&E's ELEC rate supports electrification by excluding customers from their tiering mechanism. And it also provides a special savings on high volumes of electricity by replacing a portion of typical volumetric delivery charges with a flat fee every month. And finally, it has lower seasonal rates during the cold months, and that can make electric heating more economical. ELEC also creates another rate option for eligible customers, which should be particularly beneficial for customers with that high winter seasonal usage, such as customers with electric heat pumps. Other electrification customers, such as those with EVs, could still see lower electric charges on their EV2 rate. PG&E filed to implement their ELEC rate effective on December 1st of this year. And these rates that we are seeking approval of tonight will allow MCE to provide service and bill under the rate and make it an option for MCE customers. Staff has calculated these rates based on PG&E's illustrative rates to provide a similar cost and savings to other MCE rates. Staff believes that this is the most appropriate cost of service based on the data that's available. Staff expects only nominal fiscal impact associated with this rate implementation, as these rates are designed to collect a similar amount of revenue to other comparable rate schedules, and participation should, at least initially, be limited. With that, I'll open it up to your questions. Thank you very much.
Questions from board members?
Question, sorry.
Go ahead, Supervisor Rice.
Justin, did I read somewhere that folks who participate in net metering won't necessarily get the benefit of this? What did I read?
That's initially correct. That is not anything that is being stipulated by MCE. It is a restriction that PG&E has put into place initially, and that's simply due to limitations of their billing system. There is a full intent to make this available for net metered customers. It's just that it will not take place until a little bit later next year.
Thank you. And then was there any sort of assessment of how much of an actual impact this will have in terms of reducing what would have been an increase in energy charges to a customer who's moved a lot of their systems over to electric from gas?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. We did look at certain scenarios. I try to speak a little more generally just because there's so much case-specific situations when you look at rates like this of, well, do you have a lot of peak usage, you have a lot of winter usage and so forth. But more broadly speaking, I think customers that do have very high usage, particularly customers that have high winter usage, those are the ones that are going to do better under this rate schedule. I did look at some EV customers with more typical usage, bills in the $150 or $200 range that also qualify for the schedule. And most cases I see EV customers actually doing better on the existing electric vehicle rate. But for certain customers, really ones that might be exposed to the greatest risk of high heating costs, which are really critical for homes, this rate could be of great use to them in lowering their bills.
Thank you, Justin.
Other questions from board members? I don't see any. Do we have any public speakers who'd like to comment?
I see no raised hands, Chair.
Okay, this is an action item. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Thier and second by whom? Second by Quinto. Okay, call the roll, please.
Belvedere. Benicia.
Yes.
Concord.
Yes.
Contra Costa County. Corte Madera.
Yes.
Danville.
Yes.
El Cerrito.
Yes.
Fairfax.
Yes.
Fairfield. Lafayette.
Yes.
Larkspur. County of Marin.
Yes.
Martinez. Mill Valley.
Yes.
Moraga.
Yes.
Napa. Novato. Oakley.
Yes.
Pinole. Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Pleasant Hill.
Yes.
Richmond.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
San Anselmo. San Pablo.
Yes.
San Rafael. San Ramon.
Yes.
Sausalito. Solano.
Yes.
Tiburon.
Yes.
Vallejo. Walnut Creek.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next item is 11, proposed amendments to MCE policy 014, investment policy.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Garth Salisbury. I'm MCE's Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer. And also with me tonight is Carlos Oblitas. He's a senior portfolio strategist from Chandler Asset Management, and he'll be available here to answer any questions that the board may have about this particular agenda item. Each year, the board designates someone to be the treasurer of MCE, and I've been fortunate to be in that role for about 2.5 years now. In my role as treasurer, I'm charged with investing and managing MCE's cash reserves, which currently total approximately $200 million. So this amount can vary depending upon the time of year, as some months net cash flows are negative and others quite positive, but we should always have a corpus of around $150 million that we don't have to touch and can be invested. So as treasurer, I'm bringing some significant amendments to the investment policy for your consideration tonight. Next slide. So the investment policy was originally adopted in 2018, and we have amended it twice since then. Due to significant interest rate movements we've been experienced over the past 3 years, MCE solicited proposals from investment advisors to assist us in the management of a portion of those investments. Following the retention of Chandler Asset Management as our investment advisor, staff is recommending additional revisions to this investment policy. Next slide. So our investment history has really been driven, obviously, in large part by the amount of cash we have to invest, but also in the level of interest rates. And so, as you can see, in fiscal 2020, we had pretty significant investment earnings, and then that dropped off really as a result of reductions in interest rate during the pandemic. Okay, we've historically invested our reserves primarily in money market funds, collateralized money market funds, and they track the local agency investment fund, LAIF, which is a managed portfolio that the state treasurer manages. And also we have invested in FDIC insured short-term CDs. And again, interest earnings have very significantly as rates have changed. Next slide. Here's just kind of a tracking of some of those interest rates. The federal funds rate was increased rather dramatically as the economy was picking up after a long and sort of relatively quiet period in terms of growth and so on after the financial crisis. They were raised quite considerably by the Fed, and then the pandemic hit, and they were reduced dramatically down to near zero. Then after the pandemic, in an effort to effectively to fight inflation, Federal Reserve has been increasing interest rates dramatically again, such that now, even on this chart to the right, the 2-year Treasury note yield, we could has a yield of well over 4% and approaching 4.5%. Next slide.
Do we currently observe a inverted yield curve?
I believe so. Yes, beyond it's not that inverted if it's inverted at all, but it's very likely to be inverted soon. And Carlos, maybe you can answer that question. I'm not looking out much past 5 years these days, but what does it look like beyond that?
Absolutely. There is an inversion right now of the yield curve, primarily between 2 and 10 years. As the Federal Reserve has continued to raise interest rates, shorter investment yields have been coming up, while longer investments haven't moved as much. Normally, longer treasuries move with inflationary expectation, and as your CEO or your CFO stated, we have strong inflation numbers, but given sentiment by investors, you're seeing a lot of them purchase securities out in that range, which is pushing those yields down in anticipation that at some point the Federal Reserve will have to pivot and eventually lower interest rates to stimulate the economy from the damage that we're getting from these higher rates.
Thank you, Carlos. So we undertook an RFP process. I'm sorry, is there other question? No? Okay. So we went through an RFP process and selected Chandler Asset Management to assist us in investing a portion of our reserves, and that's up to about $100 million. So a little bit about Chandler. They were founded in 1998 by Kay Chandler. Currently, the CEO is Marty Cassell, and the president is Nicole Dragoo. We really liked what we saw from Chandler in the RFP process. They have they're local, in some ways they have local offices in Nevada and Oakland. They're also an advisor to many of the MCE communities, including the cities of Vallejo, Fairfield, Pleasant Hill, Pittsburgh, and the town of Danville. They currently have over $28 billion under management, and very strong alignment with MCE's goals and values. Next slide. Wanted to make sure that the board understood just how this works and how we will work with an investment advisor. Chandler Asset Management, I'll call him CAM. CAM does not purchase securities directly for MCE or sell them to MCE. CAM is an advisor and only recommends the purchase of specific investments and sources them from broker dealers, banks, and other intermediaries. A bidding process is used when selecting a security for purchase, and price checking against other benchmarks is used when competitive bids are not possible. Chandler Asset Management does not hold our securities. Those are held by a separate custodian bank, and that'll be US Bank. CAM is paid a flat fee based on the value of our assets under management. They will do a sophisticated portfolio management for us to stated duration and credit quality goals against industry benchmarks. And they have really good, strong portfolio reporting, which you receive those monthly reports or quarterly treasury reports from me. These will now have included all of those investments that CAM directs for us. Next slide. So I want to talk about some of the proposed amendments to our investment policy. And then the first one is in the permitted investment. The proposed updates to the policy include additional permitted investments, but all of these investments are allowed in the California Government Code. They will help enhance diversification and offer higher return options with little incremental risk. The additional permitted investments that we're proposing include California municipal securities issued by the state and its political subdivisions, with certain minimum ratings, collateralized repurchase agreements, AA-rated medium-term corporate notes, asset-backed securities, and supernatural debt. If you looked at the amendments to the investment policy, next slide. Most of those amendments were really around adding protections and best practices in the policy. It now includes a scope section detailing what MCE's funds are subject to the policy, augmenting the delegation of authority selection to include an engagement of a professional money manager, adding a whole new section on ethics and conflicts of interest, and adding additional concentration and credit limits into the different asset classes in order to enhance safety and liquidity. Also augmenting the requirements for brokers and other financial institutions in business with MCE, adding new sections addressing the management of credit and market risk in the portfolio, and we also adding a glossary of investment terms to make the policy more readable and understandable. Next slide. So the recommendation is to approve the proposed amendments to MCE Policy 014 investment policy. I'd like to open it up for questions, and this is an action item tonight.
Okay, are there questions from board members? Director Thier, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Could you go back and talk, Garth, a little bit more about some of the checks and balances that I think were on the first slide for the work that MCE will have with Chandler Investments?
Talk a little bit more. Sure.
Thank you.
We can go back to that slide if we can, and sorry, no, let's go forward. Sorry, a couple more. Again, we don't have, so let's go to page 5 and one more. Okay, so we wanted to make it clear that Chandler Asset Management does not sell us securities. directly. In other words, they don't sell them from their portfolio where they would have an opportunity to mark them up. Again, they're only recommending purchase of securities and from certain sort of pre-approved broker dealers, banks, and other intermediaries. And then again, once they've determined a specific investment, to the extent possible, they'll receive bids from those different broker dealers and intermediaries. And again, when a bidding process is not possible, then they'll check that price, for that day and time against a market benchmark. So it really important, certainly was important for us and for me to understand that, again, that Chandler is paid a fee, sort of an average fee on our outstanding amount that they're managing for us and directing investments for. They don't make money by buying and selling securities to us, where there's obviously a real opportunity for them, to do something that's not necessarily in our best interest. They really will bring a level of sophistication to what we're doing with the portfolio by investing specifically to around these certain benchmarks within certain durations as a portfolio strategy. And then we'll be able to check that and track that against industry benchmarks. So again, a lot of protections here, and this should really enhance what we're able to do in terms of the yield on a good portion of our investment.
Okay, thank you so much.
Director Wilkinson.
Thanks, Garth. Garth, do you mind stop sharing the screen, because I can't actually see you. Perfect. Thank you. So I had a few questions, and I'm sorry for joining late. I was curious to see whether this investment policy was modeled off other public agencies, and if so, which ones?
I'm sorry. I'm just some reason my camera doesn't seem to be working. Can you see me at all? Because I can't see myself even. Okay.
No.
All right. So yes, this was the investment policy was originally created using some other examples. Soon after I joined, I went in and actually looked at a number of investment policies of our member communities and amended it further. So this most recent round was also designed after many of the other ones that are currently being used by some of our members. And in fact, my understanding from Carlos is that those communities that I mentioned that also work with Chandler, this investment policy looks very much like, if not exactly like, those policies.
Okay. And would you be the biggest client of sorry, I don't know the name of the investment firm.
Chandler Asset Management? I think not. So Carlos, did you want to respond to that?
Absolutely. Director Wilkinson, we primarily manage money for local governments. From an assets under management standpoint, local governments make up about 75% of our book of business. From a head count, it's closer to 95%. And those account sizes range anywhere from 2 billion, 2.5 billion, all the way down to 5 million. An average size for our firm would be somewhere around the 90 to about $150 million range.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I do have a few questions. So obviously with Moses for local government, we're more familiar with an RFP process, which is lowest accepted bid. And so I was curious to know what the criteria were for selecting the asset manager.
Yeah, the criteria were, it was experience, it was service, it was, again, the local presence was definitely a factor. The pricing that we received from the four providers were all right on top of each other. Actually, Chandler Asset Management was tiered such that as we were able to have them manage more funds, the fee went down. So but their fee on average was right on top of where the other three bids were. And again, we had, but it was a local presence, a smaller firm that was clearly in all respects going to give us better service than some of the larger banks that we had talked to. So really, and in our review process and scoring process, Chandler was a unanimous decision based on points.
Okay, thanks, Garth. And then I was curious to know from Carlos what the investment philosophy is. Is it very active or is it passive management?
Well, it's active management, but I want to stress that the goals that we have for these policy or for these investment programs are the exact same goals that are dictated by California government code: safety and liquidity first. We purchase every asset with the intent to hold the maturity. That means that if we buy a security in the 5-year range, which is the generally the limit for local government investments, we're able to and comfortable in holding that security for 5 years. There may be periodic sales before maturity to rebalance the portfolio, typically to a duration target. We try to discipline, we follow a disciplined approach. We target durations to not be guessing the general, the interest rate direction or the magnitude of changes in interest rates. We take a long-term view. We make incremental changes in the portfolio, but it's all within the context of safety and liquidity.
Okay. And one thing that I was curious in terms of your asset-backed securities, what type of assets are you looking at there?
Currently, we're looking at auto loan structures and very high credit quality credit card structures. The primary names that we're seeing are BMW, Honda Auto Owners Trust. We're buying, the tranches we're buying are very liquid. They typically receive the first prepayments, so they tend to be on the shorter end of the scale. We look for structures with strong credit enhancements like credit facilities or over collateralization. It's not just simply about the credit rating, but understanding the actual structure and how it pays you.
Okay. And then my final question, which just was out of curiosity, is where can you find AA corporate paper nowadays?
You can. It's very limited, and that might be a typo. I think that in the policy it's a single A plus, but we can buy AA corporates. It's a hard thing to do. Believe it or not, there are some fossil fuel companies, but we don't buy those because that's one of the things that working with your staff. We understood that that's not part of the mission to include those types of securities in the investment program. Aside from that, there are some manufacturers out there. We also find certain insurance companies, New York Mutual, New York Life, MetLife, Prudential, that offer you a AA, in some instances AAA credits. The AA, to your point, I think the point you're trying to make is the AA credit world is very limited. So we do seek obviously as high credit quality as we can go, where we are able to diversify the portfolio. This is one of the reasons why we wrote additional rules and worked very closely with your staff to include parameters that aren't in code, such as providing issuer concentration limits. So it's really a risk management approach.
Okay, so just fine, so I do understand it, that there are no investment targets within this as such, then the priority is just in terms of these other goals, in terms of liquidity, etc. And most things are hold to maturity.
That's correct. There is an investment target in maintaining the duration to a duration target. We're going to measure that target based on an index. The index is going to be constructed of a range of maturities with its associated duration. So working with staff, the initial discussions would be that we would maintain the bulk of the investments between 1 and 5 years with an average duration target of 2.5 years. Generally, we will maintain our duration somewhere within a 20% band of that duration target. So it's dynamic. We can ratchet down to the duration if interest rates are on the rise, and we anticipate that they continue to be, but we wouldn't stray too far from that target. Otherwise, the overall risk profile of the investment program would change dramatically.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you.
Are there any more questions from board members? I don't see any. Are there any comments from members of the public?
Chair, there's a member of the public, Daniel Sejadin, that would like to speak.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Does Chandler offer any of its own funds? And if they do, would MCE be investing in those funds? And is there a fee structure embedded in those funds that's separate from the fee that's being paid for management? Thank you.
Yes, I can answer that question. No, as I think we tried to mention, we're not, they don't offer securities. They don't, so we will not be purchasing securities or something from them. Again, they will be targeting those permitted investments as outlined in the policy. And again, those would be purchased from and through a bidding process from broker dealers and other investors. So again, they don't provide any investments. They don't sell us anything. We don't buy anything from them. Again, they are just helping us manage and direct those investments within the permitted investment portfolio.
Great, thanks for the clarification. I just wanted to clarify that in no buying or selling, there was no fund, which is kind of separate from buying or selling a single security. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the public?
I see no raised hands, Chair.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll move adoption of the proposed amendments to MCE policy number 14.
Second.
Okay, motion by Perkins, second by Thier. Call the roll, please.
Belvedere,
Yes.
Benicia,
Yes.
Concord. Contra Costa County. Corte Madera,
Yes.
Danville.
Yes.
Yes for Corte Madera.
Thank you. El Cerrito,
Yes.
Fairfax,
Yes.
Fairfield, Lafayette,
Yes.
Larkspur, County of Marin,
Yes.
Martinez, Mill Valley,
Yes.
Moraga,
Yes.
Napa, Novato, Oakley,
Yes.
Pinal, Pittsburgh,
Yes.
Pleasant Hill,
Yes.
Richmond,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
San Anselmo, San Pablo,
Yes.
San Rafael, San Ramon,
Yes.
Sausalito, Solano,
Yes.
Tiburon, Tiburon,
Yes.
thank you. Vallejo, Walnut Creek,
Yes.
motion carries.
The next item 12 is budget update and possible rate increases in fiscal year 22-23. This is a discussion item only.
Right, and we've got a presentation here. There we go.
Great. So, good evening, everyone. Again, this is Garth Salisbury, and I apologize for some reasons. It's never happened. Probably better for for everyone else. My camera doesn't seem to be working. As many times as I've turned it off and on, it's just not working. So, you won't have the benefit of looking at me, which again is probably a positive thing. But we'd like to follow on really from some of the things we talked about during the board retreat and talk about really what's going on in the markets. You've heard a little bit about that today, from David Potofsky and others. But we do want to talk to you about the effects that we're seeing, in these very high cost energy markets. So next slide. So again, discussed during the board retreat, 2022 statewide energy prices are unusually high. It's due to natural gas prices, drought, core inflation, and so on. High energy prices, supply chain issues, and other delays in project completion date. These have significantly increased the cost to MCE and reduced our net revenue forecast for the current and future fiscal years. If you recall, in early 2022, the board enacted a limited rate increase, a limited one in January, and then completed it in March. But that rate increase also provided savings to customers versus PG&E, and MCE customers are expected to save around $90 million during this during the calendar year. MCE could increase rates in January to better cover our costs and to meet our financial goals while still providing savings compared to PG&E. Next slide. And next slide again. So again, this was a lot of the themes and topics we talked about during the retreat, but between CAISO energy costs up dramatically 60% so far in 2022, carbon-free energy, because of the drought, hydroelectric supply, and some import capacity from the Pacific Northwest. RA costs, we've talked about that a lot at board meetings and committee meetings. Increasing costs and availability. Natural gas prices are up dramatically. Inflation and interest rates. All these things are affecting MCE's cost of doing business. And multiple factors are tightening the supply chain. Shortages in labor, equipment, parts, shipping, COVID-19 shutdowns. All of these things are impacting MCE's ability to contract and contract at prices, and also for those projects that we've already contracted for to come online on time. Next slide. So let's just take some quick snapshots here of these costs that are affecting the agency. Natural gas prices. Natural gas prices at PG&E Citygate are up 300% since June of 2020. And you say, well, MCE doesn't purchase gas fired power and electricity, but in fact gas prices affect the marketplace and affect market prices in a way that almost no other fuel does. So there's a lot of gas fired capacity in California, and so as the price of natural gas goes up, so do market prices. Next slide. Here's a look at forward prices. MCE does a tremendous amount of hedging looking forward into the next fiscal year, the next calendar year. And this is a look at what forward prices have done. At the bottom, you see in September of 21, the forward price for September of 22 is around $80 megawatt. By September of this year, the current market price or short forward price was double that. So we're seeing this sort of across the board in all months of the year. So it's not just current market prices, but forward prices as well. Next slide. Here's a look at sort of the CAISO market, the day ahead prices. This is more like, think of it as sort of real-time energy and day ahead energy. Those prices are up 60% since April, between Q1 and Q2, and versus 2021 and 22. So I'm sorry, let me restate that. So from 21 to 2022, those prices are up 60%. Next slide. RA, you've heard about that again a lot. RA costs from 2019 are literally 3 times as much we expect to be in 2023, and double what they are from 2019 to this year. Next slide. So here is a look at the CPUC market price benchmarks. And these are very important, really, for the calculation of the PCIA. And we'll see just what effect this has had in these increasing prices. So since 2020, the market price benchmarks for peak energy at $36. We project next year it's about $88, and off peak between 2020 and 2023, $30 to $77. So the silver lining in these increased market price benchmarks is that these higher prices reduce the PCIA. Next slide. So I think this is the most telling slide in the impact on the PCIA. So in 2021, the PCIA that our customers pay to PG&E was a little over 4.5 cents. Last year, that dropped to just below 2 cents. And right now, given some of the information that we received from PG&E just this week, we anticipate that the PCIA will go negative next year. Okay, next slide. So what are the fiscal impacts been to MCE? So these projects that we have under contract that we anticipated to be online this year, they've been delayed. And this is not, these are not small projects. Some, over 100 megawatt projects. Again, when we set this budget, originally, it was anticipated that these projects would be online and producing energy at the contracted price. But they're being delayed due to supply chain issues for renegotiation, other aspects. Also, what we're finding is due to congestion, transmission constraints, and curtailment on the California grid, MCE is not receiving all of the energy and revenue from some of our large solar contracts. So delays in project availability when we set the budget, or the ability to receive projects already online, results in MCE having to replace this energy and RA in the current real-time markets, or looking forward at the forward market prices. Next slide. This is a look at how we set our budget in terms of the projected cost of energy. That's the green line, and this was just in March of this year. That light green line at the top, the solid line, is the actual prices we have been experiencing as we pay for energy and all the cost of energy in RA over the course of the year so far. And so through August, that's actuals. The dotted line is the projected cost of actual cost of energy. And as you can see, what we've experienced most recently is dramatically higher than what we had budgeted. And even what we projected it's at least 10% or more above what we had used to calculate our budget. Next slide. So this is, again, I think the most telling sort of depiction of what the effects of these costs, increased cost, delayed projects, curtailment on the grid has resulted in our projections. So what this is a graphic depiction of our projected net revenues given rates where they were after our rate increase at the beginning of this year. And after we pay all our expenses, we anticipated after the rate increase that MCE would net, in addition to our net position, of $115 million. By the time we set the budget, and if you recall, the budget projected that we would produce $96 million to the net. By May, that had dropped to 70 million, and so far, and by September, that's dropped to 10 million. Next slide. So this is a little bit of a historical look and then a projection for the current fiscal year. So when we set our budget back in 2021, we anticipated, we projected 48 million to the net. We ended up at 28. Again, we really started seeing some of these increased costs affect us in fiscal 21-22. We started out budgeting 41 million, ended up with 13, but again, that was after we instituted a rate increase. in January and March. We caught that last month of the fiscal year to help us stay positive. And in the current budget and in the current fiscal year, we started out at 98, now looking at 10, and could be certainly be less as we kind of go through the rest of the fiscal year. Next slide. This is also a quick snapshot of our reserve goals. That's in the blue, and our actual reserves through 2021-22, and then projections going forward. The fact is, as our costs go up, our reserve targets are based on our costs. So the targets go up, but our progress, or the progress we're making against meeting those reserve targets, we're really pretty much treading water. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Justin Kudo. He's going to talk to us about some possible rate change scenarios and what those effects might look like on our customers. Justin?
Thank you, Garth. So this is a great chance to focus on some good news, that the savings we're going to focus a little bit on the savings that MCE's delivered to customers in 2022 and where we see PG&E's rates going next year, as well as some of the impacts for scenarios of increasing MCE's rates in January. Let's start out here with some very positive news for MCE on the rate competitiveness front by returning to the negative PCI that was mentioned earlier. Just 3 days ago, PG&E released an update of what's called its ERA, or its Energy Resource Recovery Account forecast. This gives us a projection of what PG&E's generation rates and the PCI rate will be based on current market conditions and estimates. These figures will still change a bit before January, but in these we can see the impacts of the market price benchmarks for the CPUC that were mentioned in earlier slides. PG&E's rates for its non-CCA customers, which are shown on the left here, are essentially going to be unchanged. There are some things that are being shuffled around, but the overall rate is only increasing by 0.2 cents. It might be a small surprise to see that the PCIA is in there. I did want to call attention to that in case there were any questions about that. The PCIA is something that PG&E has long argued is a cost inherent within their generation rates. So earlier this year, they were required to separate these components out as they do for their CCA customers. Bottom line, though, their rates for their customers, the opted out customers, aren't forecast to change very much next year. On the other hand, you'll note on the right side that the costs for MCE customers are expected to improve significantly due to a large reduction in the PCIA. You'll see that on the third row there. The average PCIA paid by MCE households today is about 2.1 cents. And under this forecast, that would drop all the way down to a negative 0.6 cents. And that means that MCE customers would see a small credit on usage due to over-collected PCIA during this year based on the actual market conditions. Bottom line, MCE is currently saving households about $11 a month compared with PG&E's rates. And if PG&E drops the PCI as forecast in January and absent any sort of MCE rate increase, we would in fact be estimated to save customers about $24 per month next year. Next slide. Thank you. So looking at today's rates, as we mentioned, saving customers about typical household about $11 a month. We are, overall across all customers, we are estimated to be saving customers about $10 million a month. And by the end of the year, we should have saved customers about $90 million during this calendar year. Brief reminder that we were a little more expensive than PG&E briefly at the beginning of the year until PG&E's 2022 rate change took effect. That's why that's not 12 times the $10 million amount. This would jump all the way up to $175 million next year, absent the really needed increase to MCE's rates. And while we've been providing these savings, MCE's been absorbing the significantly increased cost of energy this year instead of passing it on to customers. I think it's fair to say that MCE, and really for that matter, all energy providers statewide, if they knew the severity of energy market conditions going into this year, the proposed rates would have been proposed to be set a little bit higher. Next slide. So one of MCE's rate setting principles is to provide rate stability to customers, and that's something that we've really delivered on over our years of operation. While we take rate competitiveness into consideration, our rates are ultimately driven by a revenue requirement. That's the cost of MCE's energy resources, business operations, programs, appropriately funded reserves, and so forth. Setting rates based on our cost of service means that MCE sometimes is a little more expensive than PG&E or a little bit less expensive than PG&E. Next slide. This can be a different approach from many other CCAs, which have goals or even requirements to stay below PG&E. This meant that on average, other CCAs handled the last 2 years very differently than how MCE's rates were set. Most CCAs cut rates dramatically in 2021 to stay under PG&E, even if it meant operating at a loss for the year in some cases. When the PCIA dropped and PG&E rates went up this year, most of those CCAs nearly doubled their rates. MCE's more moderate approach raised rates that passed on much of that headroom gap between our rates and PG&E's along to customers as savings. Next slide. So let's take a look at how an MCE rate increase might impact the average household. Under the default household rate, the average monthly bill is about $148 per month today. Starting at the top, you'll note that leaving rates as they are and not increasing them at all would actually result in a pretty big savings to customers, a lower bill than they're paying today, $136 or about $12 a month less than today. That's really from that PCIA drop. Even under a 2-cent rate increase, customers are forecast to still see lower bills than they pay today because of the reduction in PCIA. At a 3-cent increase, that would put bills nominally higher than they are today, but still be about $10 a month less than PG&E service. And the bottom row shows the impacts of a 5-cent increase, which would put the average household bill at about $11 higher than today, but according to forecasts, would still be nominally less expensive than PG&E service. Next slide. As we noted earlier, higher energy costs have eliminated most of MCE's contribution to its reserve targets, which we had set out to have almost fully funded by the end of this fiscal year. A 2 to 5 cent increase to system average rates is estimated to add between 21 and 52 million to MCE's net position this fiscal year, based on the current forecasts of costs and of additional revenues. And they would also really help us better endure any additional fluctuations in energy costs that might occur. Next slide. And with that, I'll turn it back over to our CFO, Garth.
Thanks, Justin. So again, this is a discussion item. So we wanted to really get the discussion going here. Staff, we're going to prepare a proposal to increase rates effective January 1, 2023 for the board's consideration. And so we wanted to have a conversation, have an opportunity for board members to ask questions about what we're experiencing. Again, we don't have a specific proposal at this time. We'll come back first to the executive committee in early November for some proposals. But again, we wanted to have a discussion tonight about, given the market volatility, these increased costs we've been seeing, that we're seemingly chasing our reserve targets year to year as costs continue to go up. we wanted to talk about, what possible range of rate increases should we consider and bring back for the board consideration. So, Mayor, Director Butt, I'll turn it over to you to direct questions.
So when do you anticipate this becoming an action item, in November or December?
Yes, in November. It would go to XCOM in early November, and then to the full board in November. And then there's a 30-day period on which, to have the board finally approve the rate increase at a December meeting to be effective January 1 is sort of the current preliminary proposal.
Okay, thank you. So Director Perry, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question. You might not have the statistics now, but something that would be interesting to know when we consider this next month is what other CCAs are considering in terms of rate increases. And maybe by November we'll have a better sense of that. And then I'd be interested as a new board member to kind of know what our rates are compared to other CCAs that neighbor us. So those would be things I'd be looking at, as well as I have a few questions on kind of the reserve policy as well. And I know this isn't what we're discussing tonight, but maybe I can take those offline as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'd be happy to answer those questions. I think I can do that here. As mentioned in the slide earlier about rate stability, MCE really does have the lowest rates of CCAs within PG&E service area today. We are really ahead of this in terms of interpreting what PG&E's rates are and what we might do next year. Other CCAs, as far as I know, have not discussed it, and indeed, one of the most pivotal documents to review to get an indication of how much flexibility a CCA might have with rates was only published by PG&E 3 days ago. So I would say that we are well ahead of it, and other CCAs haven't really given a lot of indication. It is consistent with the last few years. It's likely that many CCAs will try to raise their rates to just under PG&E, but that's a little bit speculative, and their boards will have to decide on that, of course.
Yeah, I might add also that some CCAs have a policy that they don't even have to go back to their board to change their rates as long as they are below PG&E's, with the PCIA. So we saw some of that happen last year as well, where they just automatically raised rates to be just under PG&E.
Director Ackerman, go ahead.
Well, thank you for Justin, for what you were just describing, being ahead of the curve. Good work on keeping up with this rapidly changing environment. You showed a slide that compared projected versus actual or budgeted versus actual and projected. And it looked to me, and that it went by kind of quickly, but it looked like the projected that is going forward from today were a little less frightening than the actual numbers that were up to today. And I wondered if you could comment on what the general reason for that might be. Are we seeing, is this because of possibly inflation going in a different direction, or what's the reason why that seemed to tone down?
So I'm not exactly sure which graphic. Yeah, I don't know which.
I can
Garth,
jump in.
I believe.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that jumped out to me as well, Dr. Ackerman. So I know what you mean. It's kind of the costs of energy, power supply costs are kind of going up, and then like right around now, when it starts becoming a projection, it's going down.
Come back down to the budget again. Yeah.
Why do we think it's going to go down? So yeah, Garth or Justin, did you want to comment on that?
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm going to clarify, Garth, that I believe he's talking about the power supply cost per megawatt hour and the forward forecast for that.
Okay. Yes. what we're seeing is that the forward prices, again, there was a bunch of different graphics there, and some of it was related to the time of year, which month in the year, but also kind of going forward. It is absolutely true, and I believe John DeLessi may be on the call. I know it was earlier, if he still is, but
yep, I'm still here.
Okay, John, maybe you probably could best answer this question about forward prices. In some respects, out of the ways are actually lower than current market prices.
Yeah, so I think the graph that you're commenting on, the main driver there is the summer prices are where the biggest increases have been. So we're coming off of that summer season and moving into the winter, and so you don't see as high of a above budget cost than we did in the summertime. If we project that forward into next summer, it's going to be up again, but we're coming off of that really high price period.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So that sounds like a reasonable explanation. So in the summer, when you're dealing with kind of an essential shortage of energy, then the summer is the worst time because you run right up to that shortage. And in the winter, you have a little bit more of a cushion, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Really, since 2020, when we had the first round of blackouts, the summer prices have just gone through the roof. A lot of that's just concern about shortages. When we get into a situation like we saw early September with the heat wave, prices in the market get extremely high. And so we buy a lot of our power forward, but those forward prices move in response to market conditions like that. So we've just seen a tremendous increase in basically Q3 summer power prices, as well as resource adequacy prices, that's been talked about tonight as well. A little bit less so in the non-summer months. Non-summer months are primarily driven by natural gas prices, and those have gone up. They've tripled, I think Garth said, in the last couple of years. They've come off a little bit now, and so as we get into the winter season, that's really what's driving power prices is natural gas. So we have seen a little bit of softening there, but the prices for like next summer are still sky high.
Okay, thank you.
Director Quinto, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I just what you said, John. I am concerned looking at the volatility, but also looking at just having more of this every year, and looking at what we just experienced this summer. I do have concerns about next year again, but also concerns concerning our reserve. And, for example, my city was state audited, and it took a couple of years to, get back to this and turn the city around, and we're finally out there. But looking at what, we have to deal with here with MCE, I'm always mindful now about, reserves, and I want to make sure that this board is also concerned about reserves and we stay on top of it. And I know for years MCE has always done that, but the main concern for me is the future of more volatile years like this, and with the changing climate and what we've seen in other parts of the country where energy prices has just skyrocketed because of these natural disasters. We haven't had anything like that here in a while, but we are an earthquake country. So just want to make sure that we're mindful of all of that and keeping an equal balance. But just overall, very, very proud that we are ahead of this curve and we are discussing it now. So very much appreciate that.
Director Wilkinson, go ahead.
I just had a couple of quick questions. The first one was, Garth, you discussed one of the increase in costs that MCE has been facing is because we haven't been receiving the full amount from our energy contracts, and we're having to go into the same day or whatever market to purchase. Don't we have in those agreements, don't we get compensated for that undersupply?
Well, it depends upon the nature of the contract, and you know, in certain areas where these projects are located, there's so much solar generation, Director Wilkinson, that the grid just can't handle it. You can't get it out and get it on. You can't get it from that location onto the grid, and so that, you know, it's a problem. It's a problem with the grid. It's a problem with the amount of energy that is produced in California during the day, and so you know, it's a strange problem, but it's actually a problem. With certain of our projects, we don't get all the energy that's produced in a given day.
But is that a new challenge though, specific to the sort of energy crisis that we have right now?
It is. I don't know about the energy crisis right now. It's a problem specific to certain areas of the state, where there's lots of solar generation, and there isn't the capacity, you know, or the demand at the time the solar is generated, that time during the day, to use that energy and to get it out onto the grid in places where it's needed. And I'm probably not the best person to describe the situation. I don't know, John, once again, if you want to step in here and maybe do a better job.
Yeah, well, I think we've seen a tremendous amount of solar, you know, built on the grid over the last several years. So it's a newer problem. It's primarily a result of that, and so you just have an abundance and excess of energy in a particular location during the daytime hours where there's not load locally, because a lot of these projects are in the Central Valley. It used to be farmland. There's just not a lot of load there to absorb it, and there's not enough transmission infrastructure to deliver that to other parts of the state that, you know, that needs the power. So it's really localized transmission constraints that cause the congestion, and you know, it can be so bad where prices are actually negative. So these projects have to pay to put power onto the grid during the day. We see that. We have been seeing that. That's because of transmission.
It can't discharge if it's not on the grid. Is that right?
It would if it's going to produce energy, it would have to pay rather than get paid for the energy. It would, the project in MCE controls the project, so we're really talking about MCE having to pay to put the energy onto the grid, or you can curtail it. Curtail it, you know, just means don't produce, because you're, you know, better to be zero than to have to pay to produce, right? However, there are contractual provisions where we'd have to pay for the energy anyway to the developer. So it's a difficult situation. You know, storage is the obvious potential solution to that, where you put batteries around those projects. That is, I know MCE is looking at that. That does take time. But you know, that's been a big driver of the higher power cost, is we've got some pretty big solar projects that are facing some bad congestion issues.
Okay, thanks for that. So, I mean, my only thoughts on this is that it's finding the balance between making sure that MCE is, you know, financially stable with good reserves, whilst also considering that our consumers are suffering a lot of inflation in lots of different areas right now. And so it's achieving that balance between those two, which is going to be really important. And my only question is really whether, is there scope for more mid-year rate changes if things turn out to be better than expected in terms of energy markets, so that we could offer those, you know, more a lower price at another further on into the fiscal or into the year, if that's a possibility? I guess that's my question.
I can take that one. You know, I would say that it's certainly up to the board to set rates, you know, at any time. But typically our practice has been to not change rates more than one time per year, since rate stability is really one of our goals. But we certainly could do that. And one might say that maybe we should have done that this year, you know, given how steep the prices have gone up in the market beyond what was expected. it's certainly something that the board could revisit at any time.
Okay, that's what I had. Thank you so much.
Director Haroff, go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. I just want to echo some of the comments that Sally and Gabe have made about the importance of our reserve policy. My own perspective is that, we worked very hard to develop a very robust reserve policy for this organization over a long period of time. And we've had, I think, great success in meeting our goals. Obviously, the volatility in the current markets has compromised our ability to be successful. But I think as we have conversations about where we are in terms of meeting our goals on reserves at a committee level over the coming period of time, I think we should be mindful of the history of what we have done in establishing a very robust reserve policy and trying to figure out how, in the context of our rate discussion, we preserve the integrity of our reserves. That's it.
Director Rice, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate this discussion. And I off the bat, I was thinking that I'm wanting to understand really clearly what to me, this is a lot about these are policy driven decisions. If indeed we are in stable financial shape, actually it's all policy driven. And I'm not sure, I'm not clear on a reserve policy, but I guess I'm hearkening to Director Wilkinson's comments. It's striking that balance between maintaining our fiscal integrity and alignment with whatever policies we've put in place, and maybe there needs to be adjustments there. And then to what degree can we actually serve our customers in terms of being able to weather really more difficult energy cost times. So I guess I'm just wondering if our current reserve levels allow us to dip into those reserves, increase rates, but also potentially use our reserves to mute the impact on our ratepayers. Given that, and this goes to the question of how often or when do we change rates, but I actually think that we can telegraph and communicate to our consumers that there is potentially more rate increases ahead depending on what happens. But I feel like, the whole beauty of CCAs is that we're not profit driven. And I think that so anyway, I think this is about policy and also about taking advantage of the position we're in, if indeed our reserves allow us potentially to offset what might be needed rate increases in the near term, or at least phase them in over time with the opportunity to pull back and not have to raise rates if indeed the scenarios change. But I think I'd really love to see our policies like bulleted out on a slide at some point about what we're trying to achieve. And then to the congestion piece, I was thinking about, I wasn't sure on this, John, unlike water rights, which basically first people that got the rights, to the water, they're the last people that have their rights taken away. My sense was from what you're saying is there's been the allowance for additional capacity, especially in solar in some areas, to be put on, to be constructed and put in place without necessarily the grid capacity to handle it when everything was running 100%. And unlike water, if we were the first ones in with a project, that doesn't mean that our energy gets first place on the grid.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on both points. There's more solar allowed to be interconnected, and the CAISO independent system operator runs studies, but I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but the way that they run the studies, it's really looking at peak system conditions, and solar doesn't produce during peak system conditions. You know, it's because the peak is now in the evening when the solar is not producing. So a little bit of a mismatch there. And the net effect of that is they've allowed more solar to be built that really can't be delivered across the grid. And there is no protection for existing rights, you know, the way that you're talking about for water. It's everybody has equal priority to the transmission system, regardless of when you came on.
Okay, thank you.
So what I've noticed in the years I've been on MCE is that we've gone from a situation where rates have been reasonably stable and reasonably predictable to a condition of much more volatility and unpredictability. And I think what we ought to look at maybe is changing some of our basic policies. You know, for a long time, setting rates once a year worked well, and it was justified. But I think that in the future we need to be a little more nimble. You know, the volatility part of it, I can remember in the last 10 years or so, maybe it's not been 10, 8 or 9. You know, we spent a lot of time wringing our hands over the PCIA. You know, is it ever going to go away? Is it ever going to get lower? You know, it was such a curse, and all of a sudden it's gone. Totally unpredictable. And then while the presentation was going on, there was a line item in there talking about the natural gas Citygate price, and I was curious what Citygate was, so I Googled it, and it noted that the change in natural gas went from 10.07, which was what was shown on our slide that we just saw. In a month, it dropped to 7.31, a change of 27.41% in 1 month. So everything is all over the place. And my advice would be to look at being more nimble and look at least considering changing rates at least a couple of times a year and maybe more if we have to. Another thing that's come up in here, you know, is the curse of overproduction of solar. And it may be that, you know, if we were more conservative and built in a higher transfer of revenue to reserves, maybe we could use some of that money to incentivize or even invest in storage, because that's our big our big problem coming up. And if we do have robust reserves, that might be a great investment for those reserves. That would help stabilize our ability to set rates in the future. So that's my advice. Anybody else? Go ahead, Director Wilkinson.
I just had one other request, if this is coming back to the executive committee, because obviously a lot of MCE's costs are fixed because they're long-term energy contracts, and I realize there's some risk around that in terms of not being able to receive some of the energy. But what I'd find really useful is a greater breakdown of what's fixed, where we do have risk, etc. Because just showing us what natural gas is, it isn't easy to sort of picture how that fits into the overall rubric of our costs. And so I think that would be useful for the executive committee to see exactly where we have risk and where we don't, or at least I would find that helpful. Thanks.
Yes, Dr. Wilson, we can do that, absolutely. You know, try to kind of tell the story of how, when we set the budget, we expected certain, you know, plants to be online. We didn't expect, for example, to see this congestion out of our from the solar. And so you're absolutely right. We are, you know, very meticulous about how hedged we are. But then if these circumstances occur where projects we thought were going to be online at a fixed price, they're not online, we thought we're going to get solar at at a certain price. We don't actually get the solar. Then we have to buy that energy on the grid. We still have to pay the developer for some of that solar, under the way it's designed. So all of these things are what have had such a dramatic effect on our budget, right? And again, as we talk about ratepayers as well, clearly our design and the way we design our rates and the way we design and run our business, these increased costs are being absorbed by MCE. We're not passing those costs on to our customers. We eventually will have to for next year's budget and next year's costs. But right now, all of those increased costs have been absorbed by what was going to go to our reserves. So I agree, we probably could be and should be more nimble, look at rates more often. We're also cursed with this really delayed, results very much delayed. We actually don't see true cost and use of energy for a number of months after it actually occurs. And it's just the way that the grid is set up and how we get true ups from CAISO. So we sort of see things in slow motion. And then we're realizing, oh my gosh, these last couple of months, things have been much more expensive than we anticipated. We start talking about it, watching it, and then by the time we're ready to come to the board, it's September. So, when in a budget that started in April, but that's just kind of the reality of the way this utility industry works in California, and how we're not getting good data until a number of months after we actually are selling energy to our customers.
Director Darling, go ahead.
Yeah, the other piece of information when we get it at the executive committee that'd be good to know is how does the long-term forecast for the overall economy and whether it's, doing well or doing less well, how does that impact the rates and the demand? So that would be another piece of information I'd be looking for.
Okay.
Director Onoda, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you all for this conversation. I think this is really important and really engaging. And I believe that reserves are critical. If you don't have the reserves, if something bad happens, you're in trouble. I've learned that well in being in Moraga. I think one thing that rang true to me was what the chair said about backups. And I would love to see, to me, that's the elephant in the room, because that's where our challenges are. If we could solve that, or at least move towards solving that, I think our solar problems or challenges, so many problems would disappear. And I know that we've been doing that, trying to procure battery backups. But I would really like to see that direction. And with reserves, hopefully we can continue in that direction. But again, thank you for this conversation. This is terrific.
Director Perry, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question on the PG&E rate. So if PG&E lowers their rates mid-year and ours are right below and PG&E drops below us, do we wait till the next year or do ours automatically go down?
Well, we don't.
We would not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead, Justin.
go ahead.
Please go ahead. Go ahead. You take it.
We would wait until the next rate setting period, of course, unless there was another board decision that directed us to reconsider at that point. But historically, we have waited until the next rate setting period to do that. I would note that under normal conditions, PG&E only makes it only makes one major generation change per year. It can change due to certain other factors, but it's pretty rare. Likewise, PCIA only is usually set once per year. So those are the two main things that we're really looking to potentially compete with, and those should be, in most cases, pretty static. But a lot of things can change, certainly, in terms of policies and rates and programs being approved by the CPC.
Director Thier.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's fantastic that the board is discussing this before it's getting to the implementation phase. The conversation has been great. I think it's inherently difficult to do rate setting for any public agency, but especially when the bases on which we set the rates are constantly changing. So I'm interested in how in the past we have dealt with the PCIA and whether as the PCIA goes down, have we kept our rates constant? Have we increased our rates despite PCIA going down? So those are some questions. They don't have to be answered tonight, but for the future, when this comes either to the executive committee or back to us. Another thing that I think is critical is that, you know, ratepayers always have clear expectations about when rate changes will happen and how often. And the outreach that we do, you know, to our ratepayers is critical. It's been done very well in the past, but if there is a change, you know, that would need to be communicated clearly. I'm also interested in, there was a comment that even if new solar comes in, the pre-existing solar doesn't necessarily get an advantage. But then how is it decided who actually gets it onto the grid? So that's another question that I have. But I want to say that I really appreciate this discussion. And, you know, I do think it's critical that we make sure that we have reserves and, you know, also, you know, provide the best rates we can for our customers.
Okay, that was a robust discussion. Any other comments or questions from board members? Do we have any members of the public who want to speak on this agenda item?
I see no raised hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to our final item, number 13, board matters and staff matters. Are there any other issues that anybody wants to bring up, board or staff?
I see no raised hands, Chair.
Okay, well, with that in mind, I believe it is now time to adjourn. So have a nice evening, everybody. It's been a good meeting, a robust discussion, and we'll see.
Very interesting.
See you next.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Chairman.
you. Good night. Thank you.